We are continuing in section number 46. We're up to the part about judgment. Judging. And question 305 we're at. Okay, now let me see. So Alex, make sure to share that book with Joshua there. He has a microphone as well. Good, okay. Question 305 we're up to. And the question is, how shall we judge? It's based on Matthew 7, verses 1 and 2. It says, "Judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again." And Miss Nora, we had suggested that for you. Did you get to give some thought to that question? Okay. Can we get a microphone, Alex, for Miss Nora? Okay.
My answer is A. Cautious.
I'm sorry, so did you have some comments for that? Okay.
First, I would like to try, the wrong answers. B, not at all, because it is wrong to judge. The answer is wrong because it is not wrong to judge, because as a child of God, we have the Holy Spirit in us, and we are gifted with spiritual discernment. This means that we should know what is right from wrong in either doctrine or practice. Our knowledge of biblical doctrine informs our judgment. In Wiersbe's commentary, it says that Jesus did not forbid us to judge others, for careful discrimination or discernment is essential in the Christian life. Christian love is not blind. Philippians 1:9 and 10 says that, "And this I pray, that your love may abound yet more and more in knowledge and in all judgment, that ye may approve things that are excellent, that ye may be sincere and without offense till the day of Christ." In Romans 12:2 it says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God." When you prove, you are judging. We will have spiritual discernment when we continuously study and learn the Word of God, just like what we are doing now as a group and during our self-study of the Bible. Answer C, we should judge freely because it is so pleasant to people to have their faults pointed out. This is contrary to human nature. We should not, it is wrong. People resent or are not pleased when their weaknesses or faults are pointed out to them. We should not take liberties in intruding to people's lives. But people are free to make their own decisions. However, when somebody asks for advice because they are in doubt or wants a second opinion about a certain matter, that we should advise based on the Scripture. And for my answer, we should judge cautiously. As you have read, Matthew 7:1-2, and also in Luke 6:37, "Judge not, and ye shall not be judged. Condemn not, and ye shall not be condemned." Judgment should not be viewed as condemning. because only God can do that. Jesus warns us against condemning the actions and motives of others. He's the only one with full knowledge of a person's actions or motives. God is perfect. All of us are sinners.
Amen.
This can be illustrated in John 8, 1-11, when the scribes and Pharisees brought to Jesus an adulterous woman and asked him if she has to be stoned according to the law of Moses. Jesus answered in verse 7, "He that is without sin among us, you let him first cast a stone at her." Also, Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." And in Romans 14:4, "Who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth and falleth. Yea, he should be holden up, for God is able to make him stand." And also in Romans 4:10, "But why dost thou judge thy brother? Or why dost thou set at naught thy brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat. God's standard is the only measure for everyone, as cited in Matthew 7:2. So whatever is God's standard, we will be judged with the same as everybody else.
Okay. Okay, let me amplify some of those things there. First, let me ask, now Josh, you are probably, by virtue of your age and being around, okay, how much time you've been able to be exposed to different kinds of things. When I read Matthew 7, verse 1, where it says, "Judge not, that you be not judged," have you ever heard this phrase being used at all?
No.
Okay. And Alex, which one of you is older, Alex or Josh? Okay, so Alex, you're a little bit older. Have you ever heard this phrase being used, "Judge not, lest you be that you be not judged"? Have you ever heard that used?
Kind of.
Kind of. And kind of is probably a good word because I've talked about this periodically here at church, so you would probably be more likely to have heard reference to that. Now, going up in age, okay, everybody else, how many people have ever heard this phrase being used by people? Okay, yeah. Okay, there. Now, the reason why I say this, guys, is, where I point this out for you is because this is actually an extremely common statement. It's extremely common. It's used very often. Judge not that you be not judged. And the idea is people are telling you not to judge. Typically, it happens when you've criticized them and you've maybe found fault with something, and they will say, and you'll hear this in the future at some time, well, actually, maybe you'll hear it in the future sometime. I'll tell you why not. You'll hear somebody then come back at you, "Judge not," okay? And they'll say, "Jesus said, don't judge." And they'll quote that verse, or at least they'll quote the first half of the verse. And what they do is they don't realize the entire context of this whole idea. Now, why is it that you might not get to hear this, or why you haven't heard it? Here's why you wouldn't have heard it, is because unless if you are speaking from a moral position, like for instance, if you're known to be a Christian and you go to find a problem with what somebody's doing, that's when they'll do it. So you've got to generally be speaking as a Christian. So now when you go to school, do you walk around saying, "Jesus said this and Jesus said that"? Do you ever do that? You're not likely, Josh, do you ever do that in school? Do you ever go around school saying, "Jesus said this and Jesus said that"? You do? You actually say things like that? Well, that's interesting. Okay. Do you ever get any flack for it?
No.
No, okay, very good. Typically, as you start to point out that something is wrong to do, that's when you're likely to hear somebody say it. They don't say that at other times because most of the time people are going around doing whatever they want and nobody's criticizing them. They may be laughing at it. They may think it's funny if somebody stole something. They might think it's funny if somebody tells a dirty joke. But if you speak up, all of a sudden, from a biblical point of view, and if you find fault with what they did, this is when you start hearing it. Now, part of it is due to your age. Typically, it's when you get older and you have to make more critical decisions, and you'll start hearing this. You regularly hear it out in the public forums, meaning like maybe some politician will say it, or somebody will be fussing at somebody else, and they'll say, "Don't judge." Jesus said, "Don't judge." I've heard it said and explained that people think that Jesus didn't go around judging anybody. Nora brought up very interesting John chapter 8 there with the adulterous woman, the woman caught in the act of adultery. And it was a very specific situation, which we will be getting into at some point. And the problem is that she had her accusers, and none of the accusers would speak up. And there's reasons for that, and Jesus says, well, I'm not going to accuse you either. And because there was a legal situation that was going on, that's what was being questioned. And they'll extract from that and say, see, Jesus had this adulterous woman, and he didn't judge her. See, Jesus doesn't judge anybody. But then they forget that there's other parts of the Bible. Actually, I shouldn't say they forget. They're usually ignorant of the scriptures. They usually have very low Bible knowledge, and they don't realize that there's other passages where Jesus was taking the Pharisees to task because of their hypocrisy, and boy, did he lambaste them. I mean, he really laid into them with criticism and with judgment. There's judgment and there's judgment. The fuller context is going to have to do with make sure, and we're going to get into this in a little while, make sure that before you judge, that you have taken care of your own sin first. Then, yeah, go ahead and judge. And we're supposed to judge with righteous judgment. So when somebody says, don't judge, mark it down, number one, they're probably very unknowledgeable when it comes to the Bible. Number two, who, as it says in option C there, who likes to hear criticism? Who likes to hear criticism? We have to be careful how we frame our message so that it is the most effective. We don't just blurt something out. We might have to approach it cautiously. Maybe there's a time when we have to blurt something out. Like, stop killing that person right now. And then the person turns around and says, don't judge. No, it's not going to be quite like that. But there are some times where you have to speak up in a judgmental way. And let's not forget the old problem of when somebody tells you not to judge, they just judged you. Okay, so when telling you not to judge anybody, they've just exercised judgment on you. So these verses are going to teach that we should not, it's not that we should not judge at all, but to be careful. And that's where A comes in, to be cautious with it. We have to be cautious because it can be a little bit complicated when you go to talk to somebody. I think there's a stereotypical notion of Christians that they're always going around judging everybody and finding fault with everything. And there are some Christians that are like that. They don't look at the larger situation. It's like, should I say something at this time? Should I hold back and wait until a later time when it's a little bit better? Maybe I should do just a little bit and not deal with the whole problem. Just the whole point here is be cautious. And in verse number 2 there, it talks about how with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. To mete out means to measure out. So let's say, let me pick on Josh again. Let's say, Josh, let's say you're being disruptive, and I said, okay, I'm going to mete out 3 punches, okay? That's how the word meet would be. I would not do that, don't worry, okay? But that's to give a sense of the idea of meeting out. And I got to be careful because when I do the same thing, you're going to say, aha, the punishment for that is 3 punches. Okay, so be careful what you measure up. Be careful how we speak out when it does come to judgment. And this is what is the gist of this passage. Okay, let's look at thank you very much, Ms. Nora. Question 306. What might the effect of our judgment of others be? What will happen as an effect when we judge others? What will happen as a result of that? And this is going to be based on Matthew 7, verses 2 to 4, and on Luke chapter 6, verses 37 to 40. They go together. Nora had just mentioned that, and this answer leaks over into the next question. Okay, so Matthew 7, 2 to 4 says, "For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and with what measure you mete, it shall be measured to you again. Why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, Let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye?" In other words, you've got the problem in yourself, and you're trying to help me take care of my problem. Now, Luke chapter 6 comes at it from a little bit of a different angle. He says in Luke chapter 6, verse 37, "Judge not, and you shall not be judged. Condemn not, and you shall not be condemned. Forgive, and you shall be forgiven. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, and shaken together, and running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that you mete, withal it shall be measured to you again. And he spake a parable unto them, Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall into the ditch? The disciple is not above his master, but every one that is perfect shall be as his master." So what might the effect of our judgment of others be? What will the effect be? It is A, our hypocrisy will end up being judged. Go ahead, Miss Nancy.
I think our attitude it just is so important in all of this, because in John 7:24 it says, "Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment." So it's not as though we can't ever exercise any judgment. As Nora pointed out, we are each given the Holy Spirit. We have discernment. We can rightly divide doctrine, as the Bible explains. We can maybe listen to a preacher and discern, oh, he's not spot on here. He's teaching works for salvation or some other such thing. Or maybe in the life of another believer, we can tell something isn't quite right. Now, if we go to them and point our finger at them and start yelling at them because we've jumped to a conclusion, that's probably not going to end well. But if you go lovingly to them and try to speak with them as you would want to be spoken to, it's probably going to have a much better outcome. Maybe not if they're resistant to sound biblical advice. But I know throughout the course of my Christian life, I've had people lovingly approach me to ask me about something that they observed and they didn't understand. Mm-hmm. And I've been so relieved and happy to explain to them what was actually going on, much to their relief. And that's because they obeyed Matthew 18, 15 to 17, which says, hey, if there's an offense, you talk to your brother nicely and you try to work it out. And that's what they were doing. And it gave us so much joy to clear up the issue. But I've also had people come at me yelling and screaming and cursing or accusing. And when I explained to them what was going on, they didn't even want to hear that there was a reasonable explanation, and it's not what they thought. They wanted to save face because they had pride. Yeah. And they dug their heels in harder and just insisted, no, there's something wrong, there's something wrong. And then they would just walk away and never make it right. And so they didn't follow the steps in Matthew 18. So if what your motivation is love, or your goal is to have things right, whether it's between you and a brother or that brother and God, there's going to be love there if that's the motivation. And that can easily be a step that we're commanded elsewhere in Scripture, that we should help somebody if we see that they're having an issue. We pray with them, we talk to them and see if we can encourage them in a better way. But if you go accusing and judging and waiting with the red pen to deduct 50 points from their Christian walk, that's not going to be well received, I don't think. And to me, it's the whole spirit of the approach that's being talked about here.
Yeah, and in fact, when you stop to think about it, we're applying this in terms of how we approach others, but something should be considered here about how we receive judgment from others. Our attitude should be to be ready to receive judgment, to cast the beam out of our own eye, perhaps. If somebody approaches you the wrong way, don't you throw it up on them and say, I don't know if you had the best attitude the way you said that, so I don't have to listen to you. Not just then how we offer judgment, but how we receive judgment is very important. Give an ear to when somebody has something to say. Know that we ourselves might be resistant to hearing something. And we might be like thinking, oh, well, you have the wrong attitude, so therefore I don't have to listen to you. No, let's make sure that we take some extra measures to receive things. Now, in this question here, especially, there are two things that are going on. Matthew and Luke, remember, Matthew is doing the Sermon on the Mount, is referring to the Sermon on the Mount. Luke is covering the Sermon on the Plain. These are two separate passages. They are similar to each other because Jesus was repeating some of these principles. In Luke, it looks like what's being measured out is mercy and forgiveness. So we're going to be forgiven, so we give, and it shall be given unto you good measure, pressed down and shaken together, shall men give into your bosom. And so the idea is that we might think in terms of mercy being given out. But this is from the opposite angle. It's not just good things. Typically, we'll quote that passage when it comes to things like tithing. When you give, it will be given to you again, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. And we always give the illustration of cereal boxes. Okay, let me ask Alex and Joshua. Do you eat cereal in the morning? You both do? Okay. Have you ever opened up a new box of cereal? Have you ever taken notice that it's not filled up all the way? Have you ever seen that? Okay. And if you look at the weight that's supposed to be in the box, it will say that it's by weight, not by volume. The reason why is because when you first pour cereal in, it's all the pieces are sort of sitting on edge and everything, but when you start to shake it together, they sort of mesh into each other and it settles. So you might get 8.5 ounces of cereal in the box, and it starts off as a cubic foot, or a third of a cubic foot. And then as it settles, it drops down to less than a third of a cubic foot, but there's still 8.5 ounces of cereal in the box. And so they had the same principle back then. They had to deal with that. It would be with what measure that we meet, okay, it's going to be measured to us again, pressed down, shaken together to where it's really settled in, and it's still going to be overflowing. And that's the way it is with God's blessings. He certainly does that. And when it comes to mercy, as we give to people mercy, it's going to be pressed down, shaken together, and running over, and this idea of being forgiven. But Matthew handles it from a different aspect. Matthew does not include the idea of forgiveness. So we can see that judgment is also something that can be pressed down, shaken together, and running over. We could receive judgment equally. When you look at C, people will think that we are very wise and discerning. Not really, okay? Typically, when we go to tell somebody something, we got it all figured out in our heads. And we have the perfect line. We go to make that approach to somebody. only we're surprised to find out that we did not anticipate everything possible. When you go to try to help somebody see the error of their ways, you start to find out that there are mitigating circumstances. What is mitigating? Mitigating is mixed. Okay, there's a mixture of circumstances that sort of alter the situation. There are things we didn't take into consideration that the person is going through. Or maybe we didn't take into consideration that we just got it all wrong to begin with, that we misinterpreted entirely. This kind of thing happens. And so, so we might think we got it all figured out. And then we approach somebody and they haven't been thinking about this. So you might have a whole line of reasoning and they haven't had a chance to figure out how to respond to you. And so they start talking, but you're not even listening because you're thinking ahead of what you're going to say. And this can be a problem. So it's not that people are going to think that we're very wise and discerning. That's not going to be the effect of our judgment. The effect of the judgment, we got to be careful. It says, what might the effect be? It might be that our hypocrisy is going to come out. Because then somebody's going to say, yeah, but what about you? Now, what about you is not a fair argument to make. If I were to steal something and somebody who was a thief came up to me and said, hey, you stole something, okay? Me saying, what about you? You did the same thing, is not going to excuse me from stealing. And in fact, you'll even find in political discourse that they call it "what about you-ism," and it's an actual phrase that's bandied about there. In logic class, they call this the A2 fallacy. Okay, do you remember where A2 comes from? From Julius Caesar, the play A2 Brute, and you too, Brutus. You're gonna kill me too. You're gonna stab me too. A2, and it's the you also do the same thing. You do the same thing. So now in all fairness, the reason that you actually use the "what about you" statement is to try to point out somebody, hoping that they'll be a little bit more merciful, because certainly they'll be understanding a little bit more. I find myself wondering about how, some of the kids, maybe they come in and maybe something falls down and gets broken, and it's like, what's the pastor going to say? And I'm like, I remember breaking some things. Why, just the other day, I remember taking the garland off one of the shelves and bent down one of the glasses. I'll often say to somebody, if I break something that I'm working on, I'll turn to them and say, boy, I'm glad that was me, because if it was you that was done it, I would have yelled at you, but I'm not going to yell at myself. So there's a point for having some sense of understanding. The more natural reaction is for somebody to look for some fault in you. And so they're going to take opportunity to call you a hypocrite. So the effect of pointing stuff out is you might end up having your hypocrisy revealed, because they want to feel more comfortable in their sin. Okay. There are several other times when this happens, some other types of situations. One of them is, I think, very, very closely related to what Nancy's saying, and that is in personal relationships. I'll have somebody who will seek out some counsel, and it's an appropriate thing to do, and they'll share a situation with me. And my job as counselor at that time is different than job as pastor, but my job as counselor is to help them figure out how to deal with the situation. And so they'll say, well, this was happening with so-and-so over here, but I don't want to say anything, because they don't want to, they think they're not supposed to judge. I'm not to judge, but I don't know what to do. Well, no, what you do is judge, go and speak up about it. Don't just avoid problems, because that way problems fester. And this happens in churches because they're human beings. It's such a common problem that's happened forever. And whole churches can get in an uproar when you let a problem fester and not to be taken care of. And you don't lance that boil and get the problem taken care of. So it's not that we should be anxious to go out and judge people and let them know and fix them at any moment, but neither should we back off and say nothing. So I've seen that as a problem. Number one, I don't want to say anything. Well, then you shouldn't have come to me for counsel then, because the answer is to Matthew 16, Matthew 18, and go to 16 is the confession of Peter. Matthew chapter 18 and go one-on-one and then bring several others. We should be dealing with the problem. Now, certainly, there are some problems that are just fine to leave alone. They're going to die on the vine. Somebody who's not living up to everything they should be, give them enough time, they're going to feel bad enough and they'll fix themselves. And that does happen. But don't just say, don't think to yourself, I can't say anything, I don't want to deal with it. No, by all means deal with it. The second type of situation is in a business relationship, where I've seen where Christian business partners, they didn't want to say anything, and so they just held back. And it's destroyed partnerships, because they thought, who am I to judge? Well, actually, you are very much there to judge, because that's what taking care of business is. You've got to make business judgments all the time. Third application, church business meetings. There are times when, there have been times, a small handful of times, where we've had to take care of a problem in church, that somebody has been really bad about something. They've been very sinful in their attitude and how they were handling things. And we've gone the process of Matthew 18 and talked with them personally. We've taken a couple of people, talked with them, and tried to get it straightened out, and they won't get it straightened out. The third step is to bring it to the church. And I've had church members say, I think this is terrible. How can we judge this person? And I'm thinking, have you been missing church that often? Because this kind of passage, this kind of thing gets talked about often enough over the course of years, and they think that we're doing something wrong by not dealing with the problem. And they think, who are they to judge? I say, well, if you're that sinful, go confess your sin to God. Take this as a lesson to yourself, as the Bible says, smite the scorner and the simple beware. If you are in sin, then you get it confessed and then get to the business meeting, because this has got to be taken care of. If you don't take care of it, then you're going to have a bigger problem, and you can have a destruction of a church. And then there was yet a fourth application of this. I was on a jury one time, several times I've been on a jury. And I was in the jury room. We were all deliberating, and we'd gotten done with the case, and now we were there in the jury to determine innocence and guilt. And somebody who was a little bit naive in life, a little bit younger, and she said, "Who are we to judge?" And I and a couple of others said, "We are to judge. We are assigned this responsibility to judge." So who are we to judge? Who are we to judge? We are the jury. That's what we're supposed to do. So you can see where this can get to be a problem. Hey, I'm a sinner too. How can I render judgment against this drug addict over here who's been distributing all kinds of drugs? Okay, you are there because that's your assigned job. So from the personal relationship to the most official kind of relationships, judgment, discernment, as Nora pointed out at the very beginning of all this, is extremely important. Extremely important. Okay. Question 307. Okay. What should we do before judging others? It's based on Matthew 7:5. Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. So what should we do before judging others? Make sure we have taken care of the same problem in our own lives. Okay, A is significant. Consider how we would feel if others judged us. It's a significant thought. Of course we should consider ourselves, but then we should act to take care of the sin that we find. Okay, it's not sufficient to do that alone. And then let's look at B. Be ready to make people pay for their offenses. No, okay, when we go to judge others, it's not that we should be ready to make people pay. A lot of times, when people go to confront others, they're not looking for restoration. They're looking for restitution. Restitution means to pay for the offense. Our purpose for judging others is for restoration. A lot of times, when people go to judge others, when they go to fuss about something and go to criticize them, they're not really looking to fix a problem. They're looking to smack back at somebody, to smack them back, and to make them feel the pain. That's why after bringing up a problem, somebody says, "Oh, I get it, I see, I'm so sorry," then the first person who brought the judgment might continue haranguing them because they're not sure that the person has paid enough. They don't really feel bad enough. And they're not going to stop until they make them feel the pain that they caused. And so it's not that they're actually looking to have the right kind of judgment. They're looking to get even more than anything else. So it's like, well, once you've described the problem and you find the solution, it's done. It's done. I've had numerous times where I've gone to talk to somebody, explain, well, okay, you've got to forgive so-and-so. And they say, okay, well, I forgive them. And then they bring it up to them again. And I point out, hey, once you've forgiven them, you're not allowed to bring it up again. You can't bring it back up again. If you forgave it, you forgave it. And we always point out the whole nature of forgiveness. So Alex, let's say Alex took my computer and threw it down the steps. Alex, what did you do? That's terrible. And Alex is like, oh man, I am so stupid. I was trying to get even with you for something. Would you forgive me? If I say to Alex, I forgive you, I cannot make Alex pay for that computer then. So I guess I got to phrase it carefully. I'll say, Alex, I forgive you for your bad attitude. Okay. But if I forgive a debt, that means you can't bring it up again. And if very specifically, let's say it's a business problem. If you forgive somebody their debt, and you go to court, and the person that you are taking to court, if he says to the judge, yeah, but Greg forgave my business debt, the judge will look at Greg and say, did you forgive him his debt? And if Greg says, well, yeah, I did. I said I forgive his debt. The judge would look at him and say, well, then what are you doing here? You can't bring this up again. Can't be done. And so that's the idea behind forgiveness. When it's done, it's got to be over with. Not that we should be ready to make people pay for their sins all over again. Okay, again, the purpose of judgment is for restoration, to get things right, to find a solution, to move forward. You got a complaint? Thank you for your complaint. So now what do? We get the solution, we apply it. Okay, question number 308. Oh, by the way, there might be restitution that might be involved, just not necessarily so. It could be involved. It's not that it's not involved at all. It's just that once we get the problem taken care of, we move forward from there. Okay, question 308. How valuable is our judgment even if we have not taken care of the same problem in our own lives? And here, we're going to look at verse 39, Luke 6:39. He spake a parable unto them. Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall into the ditch? Okay, so how valuable is our judgment, even if we have not taken care of the same problem in our own lives? It is B. It's like the blind leading the blind. Okay. Look at A. Our solutions are always valuable, even if they don't work for us. The key word is always. They're not always valuable. A is a reference to how we deceive ourselves into thinking that the ways that never work for us are of any value. Sometimes we do the things we do because they're right, even if the world in its rebellion and doing what is right doesn't seem to be successful. It might seem unsuccessful because we judge success by what the world calls success. However, this is different from thinking that we are so clever and apply ourselves to methods that can't actually work. Before we can offer advice to anyone, we should make sure that those things have worked on ourselves first. We should have success that way. It might not be success in the world standards, okay, but we want to make sure that what we've tried has worked in our own lives. So in other words, maybe telling the truth doesn't always bring about the desired effect in the world. It's still right to tell the truth all the time. We shouldn't lie about it. But if we are filled with lies and we say, well, I apply that for everybody else too, then what happens is it's the blind leading the blind. Okay, so we should have these things work on ourselves, whether it brings worldly success or just spiritual success. We should make sure that we try it ourselves first. Okay, look at C. Each person's truth has something to offer others. Okay, so this is a reference to how people look at truth. How valuable is our judgment? If we've not taken care of the same problem in our own lives, we might say, well, it doesn't matter. Each person's truth has something to offer. I hate that phrase, their truth. Okay, it's common for people to avoid applying truth to their own lives because of a lack of confidence in what is truth. In what is truth. Now the older people, they've seen this happen. Josh and Alex, there's a problem out in the world today. Have you ever heard the expression, I'm speaking my truth? Have you ever heard that? Okay. How dumb is that? As if I've got a truth about something, but your truth is different. It's not a question of my truth as if my version is true for me and your version is true for you. Something that's true is either true or it's not. If it's true for me, it's going to be true for you also. This is the result of a problem that we call postmodernism. I will not get into postmodernism today. Every once in a while I describe this. Okay, postmodernism is an attitude today that says, truth is all relevant. Okay. For Greg, he might think that this is, what color is this, Greg? It's maroon. I think it is wine colored. And Greg would say, well, according to his truth, it's maroon. According to my truth, it's wine colored. The obvious answer is that it's wine colored. Okay. And they're trying to take into the idea of a person's perception. I remember reading that, I'm sorry? Relativism. I learned that if you remember when they had color film that was out, Kodak film was in a yellow and something other box. What color was the Fujifilm box? Green and white. Was it a very, in your opinion, that green color, was it very appealing? Nancy says no. Anybody else remember that green box at all? Did you like that? Was it an appealing color green? Not particularly? Okay. Now, Fujifilm was made by a company from what country? Japan. Now, we all know all about rods and cones in our eyes, right? And how we perceive color. The Japanese, the structure of the rods and cones in their eyes was that they had the ability to have a discernment between certain green colors. They do not see the green as we necessarily see green, especially if the color is sea green. And so for the Japanese, that green on the Fujifilm box didn't look the same way as to us. And so people naturally conclude, well, you see, that's their truth. It's all relative. That's their truth. Okay, that's fine if you're talking about Fujifilm color. But killing is killing. Murder is murder. There's a difference between the two. There's killing in self-defense, and that's not murder. Some people will look at at Israel and the Palestinian Authority, and they'll say that, the Palestinians attack the Jews, but the Jews do the same thing. No, they don't do the same thing. There is no moral equivalence. When the Israelis have to defend and they end up with killing somebody because they are taking justifiable legal action of defense, it's not the same thing as what the Palestinians are doing. I always think it very strange to consider that that Israel has to go through periods of time where they are regularly having rockets landing into the country. It's commonplace to them. Totally, I mean, if that was in our experience, we would think differently about it. Could you imagine if Josh, if I was sending over some rockets landing in your backyard from Bayonne, would you not take a little bit of issue with that and say, hey, what are you doing, right? Okay, so you see, it's not the same thing. They are dealing with attacks in the one way and defense in the other way. And yet, people say, well, it's all equivalent. It's moral equivalency. So the problem is, it's not that just each person has some truth to offer others. There's truth. It is truth, period. Even in the case of the green, we can have instruments that measure light waves, and we can define what those colors are, even if we're partially blind. And so truth is not something that is one way for one person, another way for others. Our judgment has got to have proper discernment. We've got to be able to speak truth according to God's truth. And when we speak according to God's truth, then we'll be able to get somewhere. If we're not speaking according to God's truth, if all we're doing is having moral relativism, then it's just the blind leading the blind, and they're going to both fall into the ditch. Were you going to share something there, Miss Nora? Oh, do we have the microphone for her? Okay.
Well, with what is going on right now, I think even with we can see things like what is happening on TV. Mm-hmm. And we have several, channels or TV stations that is covering the same exact event. Mm-hmm. One, one station will say that it is a very peaceful protest, while behind whoever is doing the news, several fires is going on, like the buildings on fire, and also the different automobiles. So And somebody just recently said that we should know the difference between the facts from the truth.
Yes.
So, it is kind of, that is why the world is in chaos because
Right.
of these things. That's why we should always stick to what believe is the truth, which is the Word of God.
Yes. And goes to the issue of judging with righteous judgment, of using careful things. It all depends on who is spinning the thing. I think Bill O'Reilly had his show, he called it the no spin room, no spin zone. And the idea was that you have the idea of spinning the truth. Spinning the truth means that you're sort of twisting things around to put it in a certain perspective. It all goes to the issue of connotation. Okay, young guys, let's test your knowledge out. Do you know what connotation is referring to? Okay, there's denotation and connotation. Denotation is explaining something explicitly, like this is a pen, okay? Connotation would be able to say that this is a pen, okay? Why? Well, because I'm pointing something out with it, like I would point out something like that with my other thing, that it actually is a pen. And maybe you might say, by pointing out something at you, I am writing judgment on you with my finger. I'm making this up as I go along. See, this is how connotation works. Connotation is more accurate if I said, like, take another color, okay? This time, Mr. Alex, what color is this? Red. But if I call this bloody, well, they both have the same idea. Red does not have a negative connotation. Bloody, you can say, well, yeah, blood is red also. But you see what I've done is I've just spun the issue here, and I'm making it in a negative way. If I said cherry red, well, that might be a more positive connotation because everybody likes, cherries. Yum. Okay, but bloody, different thing. If I said, if you showed me a steak and you said, oh, Pastor, this is raw. It's all bloody inside. I say, no, it's just cherry red in there. You wouldn't want to. It wouldn't make the steak any more palatable to you. And so it's like saying, well, if somebody gets out of hand and does illegal activity, does that make them an insurrectionist? Well, no. Insurrection would be where you wage war on something. Okay, like the Civil War. That was insurrection. Somebody getting carried away with an activity does not equal insurrection. But here's the spin that we'll hear, like as Nora was describing, the insurrectionist, the insurrectionist, the insurrectionist, the insurrectionist. No, it was not. It was not insurrection. So this goes along with the idea of spinning, and it all depends on how you put it. We have to be careful with that righteous judgment. Okay, let's come up to our last question. We have enough time for it also. Question 309 is based on Matthew 7:6. Matthew 7:6, give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet, and turn again and rend you. So how freely, then, should we offer our judgment? See, cautiously, because people might not be ready to receive what you have to say. Okay, looking at A, okay, very, very freely, because people love to hear about their faults? No, they don't. And so they're very possibly ready to turn again on you and tear at you. Proverbs 9:8 says, reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. And this is something we sort of covered a little bit earlier. If you're a wise person and somebody has something to say to you, you might have to eat the meat and spit out the bones. Eat the meat, the good part of what they're saying to you, and the bad part that you don't like to hear, the way they said it, you got to spit out the bones. And so a wise person will receive it, but somebody who's foolish Namely, the person who's self-centered, they don't want God's way, they are resisting God, they are rejecting God because they want their own way and they don't want to hear what God has to say. That person is the foolish person. How foolish it is to reject God's wisdom. And so what happens is they end up turning on you. They don't want to hear it. He'll hate you. Proverbs 23:9 says, "Speak not in the ears of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of thy words." So this question is actually similar to question 305, which is about the nature and the way we should judge. Here the issue is how freely we should judge. There's a very real possibility that people will not only not accept what you offer, they're not going to just not accept it, they're not going to even be neutral. In the rebellious human nature, they could easily turn on you. B suggests you have to be cautious because people might use your advice to advance ahead of you. Okay, now this is talking about a different problem. You don't want to just be withholding judgment because you don't want somebody to get ahead of you. That's thinking selfishly all by itself. Even though we should be cautious as we confront others, we shouldn't hold back our judgment because of envy either. Whenever we speak the truth, it should be out of a sense of love, desiring the best for others. Ephesians 4, verses 14 to 15 says that we henceforth be no more children tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive, but speaking the truth in love, they may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. We want people to grow to become like Christ, so we speak things in love towards them. It's all of this is just out of a love for wanting to have the best for somebody. I remember years ago we had a friend of ours who was resistant to the gospel, and I remember him coming to the door, and he was Nancy happened to be the one that was at home and answered the door, and he was just concerned why it was that we were pushing our religious views on people. And he was actually a friend, but he was lost. And Nancy just pointed out, well, look, if we have the answer and the solution for cancer, wouldn't we be monstrous if we held back that information? And so does we think that we've got the answer for all of eternity for somebody's salvation. So it would be monstrous if we didn't share that. So we've got to be cautious. We've got to be cautious, but not for the sake of self-gain, but for the sake of wanting to deliver this in love, deliver the message in love.